Thank you all for being here today. Before we begin, I would like to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet here today. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. In attending today, you will be aware that we are discussing sexual violence, abuse and assault. And though today is focused on survivor support, some of you may find the discussions difficult or upsetting. I am mindful that even I may find the discussions difficult or upsetting. We are only human, and I want you to know that it's a place that you can be emotional if that's what comes. This is a small environment on purpose, so if you need to stand up, move around, leave the room, sit on the floor, do what you need. This is a safe space. There are also little tissues. There's a few if you need some in your hands. If you find this conversation difficult, there are some boxes on the table if you need. If you haven't already, but I think most of you have, please grab something to eat or drink. The toilets are located just outside this door, and if there is an emergency, we'll be directed by the venue staff and we'll exit via the stairs. I think there is meant to be one, maybe two other people attending, so they'll just make their way in if they are still attending today, but we will press on. So the format of today is that I'll be speaking for about 30 or 40 minutes. During that time, I am open to taking comments or questions. I want this to be conversational. Right now, it doesn't feel conversational, so I want it to be conversational. I'm mindful of that. If you do have any questions, please feel free to jump in. But I know that can be a bit tricky sometimes. Some people aren't comfortable doing that, so you are welcome to wait till the end where I will have an official kind of Q&A time. I have popped a little card on your seats, which is really just for you to take notes. If something comes to mind for you or you have a question and you don't want to forget it, note it down. There are extra cards if you need, so they are yours to keep. We are filming today, so I've got a couple of little cameras set up. We've been conscious not to take any footage or photos of just the general chats that have been happening because we want you to feel safe and have your privacy maintained. So if you would prefer not to be in any footage today, please let Jasmine know. She's just in the back here. So we'll be mindful. We love your beautiful faces, but we will respect your privacy. And if at any point you ask a question or you share something today, we'll be editing all of that out of any footage that is shared publicly because the whole point of safety and privacy is making sure that it's not shared without your consent. So, in addition to my earlier acknowledgement, I would also like to acknowledge the victim survivors in the room. I see you, I hear you, and I believe you. October is Sexual Violence Awareness Month. This awareness campaign is the main reason why I chose today to host this being my first event on the Gold Coast. I hope that this will be the start of many more events in the survivor support space, and I thought that it was really important to acknowledge the fact that Queensland has a whole month dedicated to this awareness. Before we talk about survivor support, which is the focus of today, let's just gain some understanding and clarify some language. You will notice that I use the words victim, victim survivor, or survivor. Some of these terms won't resonate for you. Some of them you might not agree with. It's important that when you share or when you think about this topic, that you use the language that resonates for you. So I don't do that out of disrespect, but you will find that I will use the word survivor most often. Language is powerful. So I want you to be really conscious if you are choosing to share that if you use language, that it's really something that resonates for you. It doesn't need to be what I've used. In addition to that, I will use a mix of phrases like subjected to sexual violence, but then I'll also use the phrase lived experience. I personally use the phrase lived experience because I feel that it talks about the sexual violence that we're subjected to, which is not something we opt into, it's something that happens to us. Versus lived experience can talk about what happened after, and then the healing journey, which can take decades. There may be other terms that I use, phrases that I use that don't align with you, and I want you to know that I don't use these out of disrespect. I can only speak from my own lived experience and research, and my choice of language is not to undermine yours or diminish yours in any way. So, the hard stuff. Tissues, water, shaky hands. So, what is sexual violence? Sexual violence, also known as sexual abuse or assault, is unwanted sexual behaviour towards another person. It is a non-consensual sexual act or behaviour committed that can take many forms, including rape, sexual assault or coercion. It can also present as sexual harassment, which is unwelcome or unwanted sexual attention, including unwanted touching or kissing, making suggestive comments or jokes, sending sexually explicit messages or images, or asking intrusive or explicit questions. Most of us, unfortunately, have been subjected to behaviour like this or know someone who has. But when it comes to what we do next as supporters, the lines of our support can become blurred. The first thing many people do, and it's often a subconscious act, is they think about the experience or the sexual violence and they rank it on a scale. We know that all forms of sexual violence are wrong, but what I have found to be our biggest challenge is when we look at being supporters but we're thinking about this scale. I understand that a comment or a joke may not be as traumatic for someone as rape, but when we use this physicality scale and we overlap it with the experience and the impact on the survivor, things can get really blurred. Now, the physicality scale likely exists because of our criminal justice system. We know that if someone makes a joke, a comment, they're not likely to end up in jail, but if they rape someone, they could, or could be punished in society in some way. So we have this scale, it's very clear. And in day-to-day life, we see it as things that we could potentially just tolerate versus things that we simply won't allow. And even I can kind of hear your brains thinking, because you can kind of see where I'm coming from here. We do this every day in how we look at behaviour. Where, as supporters, we get things really wrong is when we look at that physicality scale, we overlap it with the experience of the survivor, and we start telling people that because the physicality sits here, that their impact or their reaction or the trauma should also sit here, which can diminish the experience for the survivor, and it can further cause damage for their ongoing healing. This is just one example of how we can get things really wrong. And I understand why the scale exists. We all do. But I'm hoping that with some of the things I plan to share with you today, we can start thinking about how that sets our pre-conscious biases and how we can potentially start thinking about that scale and how we can unpack it and how we then lend support to survivors. In a recent question I posed online, I asked survivors to tell me what they wished their friends and family had done to support them when they had been subjected to sexual violence or had disclosed something from the past. There were over 200 responses in less than 48 hours. And the answers were heartbreaking, but in some ways not surprising. Here is some of what they shared, I say, as I blow my nose. I wish they didn't ignore me or neglect our friendship. I felt that they gave up on me when I went through a really tough time. I wish they didn't make me feel ashamed, which then meant I couldn't talk about it. I wish they listened to me and had more of an understanding of what post-traumatic stress is and didn't say things like, "You'll get over it. It wasn't even that bad." I wish they offered to help me get out of the relationship earlier. I wish they supported me in wanting to go to the police instead of worrying about our family name. I wish they didn't ask me, "Why didn't you say no?" or say things like, "He must have just got carried away. Most men aren't like that." I wish they didn't stay friends with the abuser because it was easier than supporting me. I wish they listened to me instead of just trying to provide advice, judging me, or trying to save me. I wish I was believed, that they trusted that I was telling the truth. I wish they didn't sweep it under the carpet by asking me to keep it a secret. I wish that they realised that because you're in a relationship with someone, that no still means no. I wish someone had said that it was not my fault. I wish I wasn't called an attention seeker. I wish they understood that I can't just get over it. I wish they told me that they still love me. Those are some really tough statements to read, and as I said earlier, I know that there are some of you in the room who identify as victims or victim survivors, so I want to thank you for holding space for those survivor statements, because in reality, we are sitting in the uncomfortable emotion of hearing their needs and their disappointment. We can all learn a lot from these survivors, and that's exactly why we're here today. In looking at these examples and reviewing them against research I've done and my own lived experience, I have found a few key themes that need to be considered when you're trying to be a good supporter. We know that survivors are ordinary yet extraordinary individuals who have already lived through some of life's most challenging and traumatic events. These survivors can emerge stronger and wiser as they possess the remarkable skills and courage required to overcome adversity, often navigating moments of their journey alone. We see this theme in the responses I've just mentioned: abandonment, loss of friendship, and disbelief, which can create isolation. However, as human beings, we are stronger when we walk together. And this is where survivor supporters come into play. There is an essential role for survivor support, and the right support can have a profound impact as survivors begin to shift from surviving to thriving. So let's explore some key elements required for survivors to receive ongoing support. As I've said, survivors have already demonstrated their resilience and strength by navigating their lived experiences. They have not only survived, but sometimes thrived in the face of trauma, and this is a testament to their ongoing courage and persistence. This inner strength is often born out of necessity due to what they have been subjected to. In my experience, I have found the collective strength of victim survivors to be the strongest foundation for survivor support. When survivors speak up and stand up for themselves and their fellow survivors, they create a community that is connected by lived experience, adding their one voice to the choir of stories and creating an unmatched power for connection, empathy, and allyship. An example of this is us here in this very room. In coming together to learn to be better supporters in the future, we're not only creating a space for change, but we're taking this collective strength that we have together and we're sharing it across the survivor community. There is strength in our numbers and liberation in us using our voices and sharing our vulnerability. Now, when I think about the importance of survivor supporters, I believe that they play a pivotal role in the healing journey for survivors. The first step in being a positive supporter is to believe the survivor, to listen when they share their lived experience, and to walk beside them unconditionally. Now, I'm going to share a little bit more about this phrase, walk beside, later in today's talk, but I think you'll get the sense of what I mean. Survivor supporters can provide a crucial source of empathy, understanding, and companionship that can be transformative. However, the power and direction need to remain with the survivor. Survivors may be learning how to regain their power, strength, and voice, and by walking beside them at their pace, they can benefit immensely from having a supportive network of individuals who genuinely care about their well-being. So, let's talk about some of the key elements of survivor support. Empathy is the cornerstone of survivor support. It involves understanding and sharing the feelings of survivors without judgment. There is no room for pity where empathy exists. Survivor supporters can create a safe space for survivors to express their emotions and their experiences openly when they lead with empathy. Just for some clarity, empathy is shown in how much compassion and understanding you can give, versus sympathy can feel more like a feeling of pity for someone. Some of us may have had that experience where there's a level of distance in how someone shows their understanding or compassion, and that distance can make someone uncomfortable and is likely to make them not want to share further. Sympathy in the form of pity can create the beginning of shame and can also be a type of othering. There's a distance there. And it's important that we identify the difference between empathy and sympathy and actually practice empathy. Active listening. Survivor supporters must be active listeners. They should give survivors their full attention, mindfully acknowledging their feelings and experiences. This active listening is deep and at times may require patience and sitting in uncomfortable moments. This type of listening is not designed for people who are waiting for their turn to respond. We all do it. We're all waiting and we're thinking and we're in our own head and we're kind of thinking, what am I going to say next? And you're not listening to the person. We do it to our kids all the time. Or we're waiting for our turn to fix. So we're thinking in our heads and we're waiting because we've got the answer, or we think we've got the answer, and that is the opposite of active listening. Active listening can be incredibly comforting when done with intention. But in a similar way that we must differentiate sympathy and empathy and practice empathy, we must practice active listening so we can be better at it. My challenge to you is to practice it with your partner or your kids, because it's probably going to be the thing that's going to be the hardest to do. I know that that's even hard for me, so something to consider. Another point to remember when actively listening is to not rank the survivor's impact against the physicality scale if you're trying to support the survivor fully. Your pre-existing thoughts may not matter. What matters is how they feel and the impact the sexual violence has had on them. Respecting autonomy. While offering your support, it's essential to respect the survivor's autonomy. This means that you respect their right to self-govern, make decisions, and act based on their own values and choices. Victim survivors should be encouraged to make independent choices about their healing journey and have their decisions honoured. This also applies when it comes to their decisions about reporting to the police, confronting the perpetrator, or sharing the abuse with anyone else. This is where your position of walking beside them instead of in front of them comes into practice. Education and resources. Survivor supporters can offer valuable information about available resources. These may be a mix of traditional psychologists, trauma therapists, meditation coaches, hypnotherapists, counsellors, women's groups, support lines, or physical therapies such as yoga, dance healing, or other movement-based mediums. Knowledge empowers survivors to make informed decisions about their healing journey. And though I encourage you to research and look for a range of options that you can share with the survivors in your life, please remember that these options should be made available to survivors whilst respecting their autonomy and choices. Community and connection. Building a sense of community is vital for survivors. This can take shape in connecting with others who have had similar lived experiences, as we've discussed earlier. The victim survivor community can reduce feelings of isolation and provide a support network that truly understands. However, it is essential to remember that all members of the community can provide support, not only those with lived experience. It takes a collective, united community to support survivors and to also make necessary changes to reduce trauma and abuse in our society. Sharing lived experience as a source of strength. Sharing lived experience can be a powerful way to connect with survivors. Those who have walked a similar path can offer insight, hope, and inspiration. They serve as living proof that healing and transformation are possible. Listening to their stories can be a beacon of light for those still struggling. Supporting survivors who are safe and who choose to share is vital to encourage others to also use their voices. Shame creates silence, and silence creates isolation and opportunities for further abuse. Supporting survivors and amplifying their stories shines a light on their strength and creates opportunities for ongoing healing. A little asterisk on this one: survivors have already been through so much, so if at any point they are sharing for the financial benefit of others, this should be avoided, or the survivor should be compensated in some way. Survivor stories are not entertainment, and they shouldn't be exploited or shared without the consent of the survivor. That's one that we need to talk to the media about. I hope that with the themes and suggestions that I've made today, that you have been able to maybe note mentally or actually write down one or two things that you're kind of thinking about, that you're maybe questioning, want to add to, want to practice. You've all got skills. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. You wouldn't be here if you genuinely didn't care. So hopefully in how I've been able to share just some of these key insights, you can take those tools and keep growing with them. In the online responses I spoke of earlier, I also had some really positive stories shared with me. Beautiful stories of support, kindness, empathy, and friendship. Here are some of the things survivors shared. I had friends who were there for me every step of the way, and they became my soul tribe. They told me they believed me straight away and just sat there in the silence while I cried and let out the emotions. They listened to me, and that was all I really needed, just someone to listen. They supported me to speak up and gave me the strength to use my voice. They acknowledged what happened was wrong, agreed with me that I did nothing wrong, and told me that it was not my fault. Those words meant everything to me. They provided me with a safe space to talk. I wasn't safe at home, so having a safe space to go and stay was the start of me changing my life. They simply heard what I had to say, which made me feel validated. They didn't question the truth. They asked if I needed a hug. Just asking if they could touch me was so small, but really respected my body when it didn't feel safe. They checked on me and then kept checking on me. They showed that they really cared. They told me how much I was loved and that no matter what, I could trust them to stick by me. Survivor support is fundamental, as supporters play a role in the structural scaffolding needed for ongoing healing. The companionship that victim survivors need to navigate the complexities of their trauma is an important piece of the framework. By respecting autonomy, offering resources, and engaging with the community, survivor supporters can play a role in helping survivors transform their lives beyond trauma. Ultimately, survivor support is about human connection. Together, we can walk the path towards resilience, recovery, and healing. I'm going to read chapter 28 of my memoir, which is called Walk Beside Me. There are people in my life who have been supporting me during this more recent part of my healing journey. One of the questions they have asked, a question many people have asked me over the years, is how do they best support me on this difficult journey? I can only share what has worked for me personally. Not everyone will want or need the same type of support as I do. But this is my story of survival. I can only share what I have lived. There will be supporters and survivors alike who do not agree with my path, and I completely respect that. Though I am not sharing my story to change their paths, I am simply living and travelling through my own journey one step at a time. As I've travelled on the path of healing, there have been things that haven't worked. They have annoyed and angered me. There have been moments that have set me back or decisions that have taken me on the wrong path. But that has been the part of the human experience for me. I am reminded that the detours and roadblocks are the parts that make us all similar in our experience of life, although we are all unique in our choices and chosen paths. Language has power, and I am mindful of the words I choose when I talk about my lived experience. In a similar way, I speak of the trauma instead of my trauma. The trauma is not mine, the survival is. So that is what I claim and how I choose to see myself as I continue on this journey. My biggest request as a survivor is that my supporters walk beside me. These words are specifically chosen. I believe there is a clear difference between walking ahead of someone, walking beside someone, or walking behind someone. It's not as simple as just walking with them. It's a choice in where you position yourself as their supporter. As a mother, I have walked beside my children many times. During senior high school, my eldest son experienced a very difficult time, and though I wanted to swoop in and be his saviour, I knew I couldn't. I had to walk beside him. Over the weeks of this crisis situation, he heard me say time and time again that I was walking beside him. One day, in a moment of confusion and slight frustration, he said, "Mum, why do you keep saying that with so much emphasis on the beside part? What do you mean?" I explained to him that I couldn't fix the problem he was facing if I attempted to forge ahead, fighting the battle for him and dragging him along the way. He would not learn anything from the experience, and the problem may not actually be fixed at all. We would both walk the path exhausted, me tiring from dragging him and him feeling every bump and graze whilst being dragged on the path. If I walked behind him, I may be tempted to catch him every time he stumbled, which would mean he would also not learn any of the lessons himself. In doing so, the experience would be pointless and the journey would likely take longer. Worse still, if I walked behind him, I could become a burden, expecting him to carry me as he journeyed on, and I experienced emotions of disappointment that he was on this path in the first place. Him having to carry the burden of his disappointed mother, and me being carried by my son was not a burden I was willing to put on him. So instead, I was choosing to walk beside him. I would be his counsel when he needed to share his thoughts and ideas. I would endure the rocky path ahead, never judging the paths he chose, but always being there to encourage him along the way. I would never leave his side, even in the moments that were the hardest. But I would also not do the work for him. There have been people in my life over the years who have attempted to be my saviours. Although in my childhood, in those very early years of the abuse, I well and truly needed to be saved and taken out of harm's way. This is no longer the case for me now as an adult. In the more recent years, as I have disclosed to different people, I have seen a few of them jump up in alarm. They react to my disclosure as if the abuse is happening to me right in front of their eyes, and they are shocked into a state of high alert. This in itself is a trigger, as I watch them experience their own version of fight, flight, or freeze. In this case, their bodies choose to fight. Even when realising the abuse has ceased, they seem to still want to grab their torches and pitchforks to gather an angry crowd and march up the hill to slay the dragon. They are the people who want to walk ahead of me. They want to fight the fight for me, instructing me on what to do next, or attempting to shelter me from a dragon who stopped breathing fire many years ago. They do not see the scars from the years of withstanding the trauma. These are the people who have very vocal opinions on what I should do, and they sometimes choose to criticise me, pity me, or simply be angry that I am doing it all wrong. They somehow convince themselves that they need to act now, to take control. They need to save me today. When they march ahead, determined to fix the issue at hand, they often look back at me as they drag me along this path I did not choose to walk and pity me, wondering why I can't keep up their punitive, revenge-fueled pace. This is not my path, and this is why I do not ask people to walk ahead of me. Some people have claimed that they want to walk with me, but they're really walking on a very different path. They genuinely believe that they want to help, but they are scared of the truth and the work involved in supporting someone who is experiencing healing after trauma. These people have pretended to walk with me whilst looking over at me, occasionally throwing comments over to my path, comments that are intended to be words of encouragement, like a lazy coach eating donuts on a buggy, riding on a path nearby, shouting unhelpful comments through a megaphone. Though they make a point never to get too close, they continue to walk on their own path, and to be honest, their lack of real commitment to walking with me on my journey is why their opinions are none of my business. There are people who have genuinely wanted to walk with me. They have meant well, but had no idea what to do. These people find themselves confused and have a million questions, assuming that I have all the answers. In addition to the questions, they attempt to encourage me with statements like, "You're so brave." This just makes the situation awkward, as I didn't plan any of this and I don't get up every day trying to be brave. Though these people want to walk with me, they end up being baggage. I have to drag them along as they question every step I take, attempt to take steps directly after me, walking in the imprints of my footsteps on the path. At times, I have to carry them as they cry over how sad they are for me. I don't have the capacity to carry them or their displaced emotions. After years of discovering that many people default to these positions, I have actively chosen to ask them to walk beside me. In walking beside me, they can accompany me along my journey, though they cannot map out the path ahead. I do not expect them to take charge, nor do I expect them to know what route to take. This is my journey, and at times even I do not know where we are headed. When they walk beside me at my pace, we can take the journey together. And if we come across a challenge, though I am the only person who can overcome the challenge at hand, I know that I have supporters there to talk to share in my pain, and to encourage me to keep going even when it is hard. When they walk beside me, they can also share in my joy. Similar to overcoming the challenges, they cannot create the joy, but they can share it with me in a way a true comrade does. When I explained this analogy to my son, I watched as he processed my words. As often happens with teenagers, I sat wondering if I had spoken for too long, if my words had felt like a lecture to him. Then he looked back at me and said, I think I get it. You can't walk ahead of me because I won't learn anything, and it will be really annoying because I don't want you to lead me. You can't walk behind me, catching me every time I stumble, as I won't learn a thing, but you're walking beside me, and every time I stumble, though it hurts you to watch me fall, you will wait with me. Wait as I tie my shoes, dust myself off, and get ready to walk again. Then you will walk beside me again. No matter how many times I stumble or take the wrong path, you'll be there. It's how you love me unconditionally. Yes, that's it, I said, tears welling in my eyes. It's the way I love you unconditionally. My journey of healing and the analogies I use in explaining that journey may not be for everyone. Some survivors may want you to carry them. Some may want to be caught when they stumble. Personally, I need you to walk beside me. As you walk beside me on this journey of healing and accountability, your role is to listen, your role is to believe my truth, and your role is to be there unconditionally. Thank you all for being here today, for just taking the time. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, but we're all sitting in this room talking about trauma, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that you are here not only just sitting with these difficult stories, but that you're here to make a difference in the lives of the people that you love and in the lives of the people in the community that you may not realise how much of an impact you choosing to be better is going to change their lives as well. In being here, there's a really big part of you that is already walking beside me. It's part of why I do this work. It's part of why I speak up about the hard stuff, and I just want to say thank you for walking beside me.